Hello everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. It's designed to provide you information if you're thinking about applying for the Connecting Carers in Their Community small grant program for this year. We're really excited to be offering this program again, as we know it has had really positive impacts for carers in our community. As I said, my name is Angela and I'm joined by Carers Victoria colleagues, and we are the Carers Victoria Grants team. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Wawarung, Bunurong and Wathaurong peoples. We recognise the unique place held by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the original owners and custodians of the land and waterways across our Australian continent. We also acknowledge their enduring cultural practices of caring for country and paying respect to elders past and present. Thank you for your interest in the Connecting Carers in Their Community program. This is funded by the Victorian Government and administered by Carers Victoria. This successful program is in its third round of funding and puts carers and communities at the centre. The funding aims to assist with the delivery of activities that strengthen social connectedness and carer wellbeing. This is an information session webinar. There will be pauses throughout the session for your questions, and please note that you are invited to post those questions as we progress through the presentation. As far as possible, we will answer your questions in real time, but please note, we may need to get advice in some instances, but we will get back to you. You're also welcome to use the chat function for comments and observations. Please note that the webinar is being recorded. All registered participants will receive a post-session email that will include a link to the recording. So what will we be covering? Ultimately, by the end of this session, you'll be able to determine, am I an eligible applicant? What's involved with the application process? Specifically, what are the timelines? What support and resources can I receive from Carers Victoria? Please note that this session will also include selected examples, tips, and advice with your application. The Connecting Carers in Their Community Small Grants Program in 2025 will award grants ranging from $15,000 to $25,000. They aim to assist activities that strengthen the local connection and social connection of unpaid carers. The purpose is to support small organisations and carer groups, such as carer support groups and peer groups. And the aim is to create opportunities that support carers in their caring roles. Please note that for this program, the term carer group describes any group that exists to support carers. This could be a social or cultural group, an existing carer group, a peer group, a yarning circle, or just an informal gathering of carers. Some of the eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, neighbourhood houses, existing carer support groups, or new and emerging carer support groups, Aboriginal community controlled organisations, which we will call ACOs, peer-led programs, and community groups. The following carer groups, for example, carer support groups and peer groups, will be prioritised. For example, that includes regional and remote groups, especially those impacted by fire and flood events, groups that are working directly with First Nations carers, their families and communities, multicultural and diverse communities, including younger carers, language and cultural groups. Please note that these have been identified by DFFH as the priority groups. This has come about because of research that tells us that these groups are less connected to carer groups and other carers, so are more greatly impacted by the challenges of their caring role. What we're about to go through now are three things in relation to the grant overview. What are the requirements? What are some key dates? And as an applicant who may receive the grant, you'll be a recipient, what your responsibilities will be so that you know what you are signing up for. How to apply. Organisations that are not-for-profit or volunteer groups may apply. However, it's absolutely essential that you hold an ABN. If your volunteer group doesn't have an ABN, you will need to find an auspice partner so that you can receive the grant funds and the support you might need to produce an end of activity financial report. Carers Victoria can provide advice on finding an auspice partner if that's required. Should you need assistance with this, please email the grants team at Carers Victoria. A link to that email address will be popped into the chat shortly. Essentially, the main message is that you need to be a registered group or you have to be aligned with one. You cannot be a sole trader. This is a key aspect that informs your eligibility for this grant. In regard to being auspiced by an organisation, if you are in that category where you will need to partner with an auspice, we kindly request that you have all the details of the organisation name, your auspice, their ABN, a contact person, and you also need to upload a supporting document that validates your relationship and association with that auspice. For example, a really short MOU or an agreement. It's important to understand this because if this is the case for you, you will need to upload these onto the application form, which we'll talk about later. You can always refer to the guidelines for eligible entities, but importantly, for those that are ineligible. And there are some categories that are ineligible. So for example, if you are an organisation currently funded through the Victorian Government Support for Carers program or the Additional Respite Initiative, you are not eligible. Also, providers of the Victorian Government funded Strengthening Parents program are not eligible. Education providers, including private, public or independent schools, are not eligible but may auspice. For-profit or commercial organisations, including sole traders, as I mentioned before, are absolutely not eligible for these grants. Okay, so what are the timelines? If you are successful with one of these grant applications, your funds will be dispensed sometime in October 2025 this year, and it is essential that all of the monies are spent by June 30, 2026. Please note that grant funding is not recurrent. Once you have spent all of your money and engaged with Carers Victoria as the minister of this grant, you will have to complete a final report that will be due by the 31st of July next year. We will make funds available sometime in September, but it is absolutely essential that all project activities are planned to cease by 30 June. Okay, so once you have been accepted and awarded a grant, these are the things that you will need to do. The funding agreement and invoice includes invoicing Carers Victoria for $25,000, for example, if that is what you have applied for and have been granted. And where GST is to be applied, the final invoice amount will be $27,500. Please note that is an example for $25,000, which is the upper end of this grant. Another thing that you will need to be aware of is that when you are successful, you will be required to use the Carers Victoria Carer Evaluation Tool. There will be support and advice, including guidelines for how to implement this, and that will be part of the community of practice requirement once you are successful. The community of practice is an opportunity to get together with other grant recipients online, facilitated by Carers Victoria staff, and we will go over a whole lot of things that will assist you to ensure that you can meet the deliverables on your grant agreement, including the distribution of the carer evaluation tool and the final report, which will include a summary of how your funds are spent and the learnings that you have gained from participating in this program. So I'm about to pause for some questions. And hopefully I will get a green light in regard to whether some of the questions need to be answered. Okay. I'm pushing forward as there are no questions or they are being answered in the background. So we'll move to the next part of this presentation. So this part is an overview of the grant, namely the grant objectives, the key selection criteria, and the assessment process. I will mention at this point that Carers Victoria will convene a panel of assessors from across Victoria, including regional representation, that have strong knowledge of carer services and activities. Those assessors will assess applications against the key selection criteria, the grant objectives, and the priority groupings that DFFH have identified. We will convene this panel to review the applications and then make recommendations for funding and allocation of successful grant recipients. Okay, so what are the grant objectives about? These are the 4 high-level objectives that are served through this grant program. The goal for this program is that carers ultimately are better connected in their communities, in their place. That local organisations and carer groups delivering these services that connect carers are well supported. And the activities that are provided by the projects enable carer groups to thrive and to build connectedness and carer wellbeing. And the other objective is that carer groups, support groups that exist or are new are enhanced and extended so that they can be supported to be sustainable in the future. The grant objectives underpin the key selection criteria. So imagine that they wrap around all of the things that we are looking for in a successful application. But it is important to note that the key selection criteria are what the applications will be assessed against. There are 5 key selection criteria, and they are articulated in the guidelines. However, in summary, they can be represented by those 5 boxes. For example, to what extent does the project that you are proposing in your application actually deliver things that is responsive to the needs of carers in your community? To what extent does your application highlight that your organisation can actually deliver those things? And to what extent does your application speak to the relationships that you have with your local community, existing or newly formed that you're hoping to form? And to what extent have you outlined what you're expecting are going to be the benefits and the impacts of your project for carers, remembering the grant objectives: social connectedness, carer wellbeing, connection to community and services. And finally, this selection criteria that is titled Enthusiasm for the Project is essentially about, well, what's in it for carers? If you were a carer, would you want to join your project activities? So is there a really compelling and interesting, something interesting for carers to come along and be part of what you are proposing? The advice with the key selection criteria in the application is to be really clear, to speak directly to the key selection criteria using examples. Don't make it difficult for the reader to see exactly what you are aiming to do in response to those criteria. So I'm coming up to a pause for questions and waiting for a message to see how we are tracking with our questions. Okay, we're all good to go. Next section, the application process. So this is the nuts and bolts of the process, the how to do things. So this section is going to go through the application form per se. We're going to look at a bit more of the detail in how you might apply the key selection criteria, and then we're going to look at a specific example. Now, what I do need to mention is that Smarty Grants is a tool that will be used to apply for this grant. You will also receive messages and mail outs through this application, and it will also be the tool through which you have to submit your final report. So you need to be registered with Smarty Grants to commence the application process. You may already be set up with Smarty Grants, but if not, you'll need to create a new account. And we do have some advice regarding Smarty Grants. So we do have some advice that I know has been put into the chat, so I won't go through that now. The other thing that I'd also like to mention at this point is that in the Q&A coming up next week, we will actually do a walkthrough of the application form, and that will be presented online to assist you if you're unsure. Okay, so as I mentioned, Smarty Grants is a tool used to manage the application process, communications, and final reporting. Here is the Smarty Grants landing page for Carers Victoria. This is where you'll need to go in order to start your submission. And when you do that, remembering that you will need to already have an account and be logged in, you simply press Start a Submission and off you go. It's important to note that once you have started your submission, you can save as you go. So you don't have to complete the entire thing from go to woe. Provided you do not submit, you can continue to update your application. So that's your Start a Submission section on our Carers Victoria Smarty Grants landing page. Okay, so the form. The form consists of 7 pages, but has 4 main parts. Just a reminder that the form will require you at the very beginning to upload ABN details, including ABN details, etc., of the auspice organisation, if that applies to you. So our advice is that it's really handy to have that in advance. Please note that you'll also need contact details of the primary person who is the main contact in relation to this grant application. But you also need a secondary contact. So it's a good idea to have considered who those people are in advance. The bulk of the application to really pitch and sell your project idea revolves around pages 4 and 5 of the form. This includes you giving us details of your planned project, the proposal, and the activities that you are planning to include and deliver as part of that funding. Our strong recommendation is that you put some time and detail into these aspects of the form, because not only are they key to the assessment of your application, but they will then form an activity plan that we embed in your agreement should you be successful. Page 5, your planned activities, speaks to the key selection criteria quite strongly, and we recommend that you have reviewed the details in the guidelines where the key selection criteria are broken down, and that you respond accordingly and don't leave anything out when it comes to the key selection criteria, because as I mentioned, they form the basis of the assessment of your application. Page 6 invites you to scope your expenditure as a budget and will require you to upload line items such as wages, etc. And I'll go through an example and attach a monetary amount to that then has to add up to the funded amount that you are requesting. The other thing on page 6 that's worth noting is a question, I beg your pardon, that addresses your organisational capacity to deliver. In other words, tell us what you've got in place to give the reader of this application confidence that your carer support group is going to be able to deliver on these project activities that you've outlined. We strongly advise that you are really clear in your response to this question and provide as many examples and evidence of how you demonstrate strong capacity to deliver. Just a quick note about the budget. Please refer to the guidelines for examples of items that can be included in the budget, but importantly, things that cannot be included. For example, capital items. So it's important that you review the guidelines specifically. This section that's coming up leans into how to apply for the key selection criteria. So when the assessors are reading the application, they will be viewing it really carefully to ensure that it has addressed the key selection criteria. Now, those questions relating to the key selection criteria are embedded throughout the application. You don't have to specifically look out for the key selection criteria. You just have to make sure that you're responding to all the questions in a way that is really clear. And there is advice in the form through hints as to how to do that. What's really important about your application is that you show us clearly and demonstrate to us how these planned activities are really going to improve carer wellbeing in your community and connection and carer connectedness in your community. Because the goal is that the planned activities that are being funded by this grant have a direct benefit for carers or carer groups and are really relevant to the local community. So now we're going to look at a particular example. Please note that this is a made-up example, but it's designed to illustrate just some key aspects for you. So this project title is called the Colac Community ABI Carers Support Group. Please note that this carer, what you can't see, that this applicant is a carer support group, but it does not have an ABN. Fortunately, this group has managed to seek an auspice by a not-for-profit community service organisation called Dandelion Incorporated. And that's why you see that image of dandelions. So I'll give you a moment to read the project description. A couple of things that I would like to point out about the way this project description is written, noting that you will have to write a really succinct project description in the application as well. The first thing is it's really clear and concise. There is a word limit on this, and from memory, I think it's about 100 to 150 words. The other thing about this project description is it identifies the carer group that will benefit, and it tells us the why. Some other features about this that you can't see here, but let's say we had a complete application, we would. This particular group and proposal targets a regional Victorian cohort in Colac, remembering that this is a DFFH priority cohort. The other thing about this application, if we were to look at it as a complete thing, is that they have identified that acquired brain injury, ABI, is a real gap in their community, their local community. There aren't really any support groups that bring together carers that are aligned because of this need. So here is a proposal, here is a carer support group, and here's a successful applicant. So let's have a look at how they plan to spend their money. A reminder that the planned activities that are chosen, you choose, must align with project description and meet the outcomes and objectives of this grant program, namely to connect carers in communities, support networks, and strengthen social connectedness and wellbeing. When planning a budget, you are required to add this to the application form on Smarty Grants, noting that you can add and delete line items. So there are really no limits on how many line items that you add. So let's look at this, this particular example for this ABI Carers Support Group. They've decided that they're going to have meet and greet sessions, art, music, self-care, a showcase session, an excursion, a local provider morning tea, which is great because that's speaking to the grant objectives. And then they're doing a joint event with a multicultural service, which is also a really speaks really strongly to the grant objectives and the priorities for this particular grant program, because the session facilitates a collaboration with a culturally and language diverse group. So a couple of things that we'd like to just mention about the budget line items that will correspond to this particular set of planned project activities. Don't forget wages. A lot of volunteer groups often forget to include wages, but this is your opportunity to do so, and we do encourage you to do that. We also encourage you to consider if interpreting is required for a particular event or translation services. They can all be part of your budget proposal. Now, these are just some project budget items. Again, not extensive, but just an example of something that will match what is planned. So I'm about to pause for questions at this point. And I'll just wait to see how we're going with that. Fantastic. All the questions are being answered, which is amazing. Excellent. Okay, so we get to the tail end of this presentation. So, and that is supports and services. Supports and resources. So Carers Victoria is really fortunate to be administering this program for the third year in a row. And we know that it works. We know that there are really positive impacts for carers, and we're very grateful that the Victorian government has acknowledged that this is beneficial and has given Carers Victoria the opportunity to administer this grant for the third time. Just a couple of things. You can email the grants team at any time via that email address on the screen, grants@carersvictoria.org.au. And I can assure you that there are humans who monitor that and will reply to you. You're also welcome to call our 1-800 line. So that's there, 1-800-514-845. And you will be segued to a person from our grants team who will answer your questions. Now there is a QR code up here, and this QR code will take us to the Carers Victoria webpage that is specific for this particular grant program. Now, when you get to that webpage, and please do bear with us, there are a few little technical things happening as we are updating our website, but I'm pretty sure that everything you need will be there. When you jump onto this particular, we're online now. Good, thank you. So our website's online, so everything should be good to go. When you jump onto our website and go directly to this particular grant webpage, you need to scroll to the bottom, but what you will find are the guidelines and a couple of documents that are really useful. One includes a frequently asked questions document, which pulls together a lot of the amazing learnings that we've had across the previous 2 years that people have asked, and we've been able to consolidate for you as frequently asked questions. And importantly, there is a separate document around frequently asked questions regarding auspicing. So if you are considering that auspice is the option for you, there's a separate FAQ document for that. So before I move to our final slide, just want to call in our colleagues and check that we don't need to answer anything live and that we can proceed. Great. We're wrapping up now. Okay. Thank you so much for your interest in the Connecting Carers in Their Community grant program and for attending this particular session. As I said, should you need more information or you have specific questions, we are also offering an opportunity for you to have your questions addressed in a Q&A session for 1 hour on the 12th of August. Importantly to note, this session will include an actual walkthrough of the form for on Smarty Grants. We found that this was a request last year and it proved to be really helpful for those people who attended. Should you like anything else as a topic covered, you're welcome to pop that into the chat or send that via the Q&A function. In doing so, we'll endeavour to cover that off if it's relevant and applicable to most people. Otherwise, we'll reach out to you and do that individually. The other thing that I'd also like to mention are some Carers of Victoria support services and resources. The best way to keep informed about grant opportunities and other events and supports that we can offer is to sign up for the service provider newsletter, and that will be in the chat as well. Once again, we thank you for your attendance. Your feedback is really important. We seek to improve all the time. And there is a really short survey with 3 questions that will take no longer than 2 to 3 minutes. And we'd really love you to complete that so that we can improve on this presentation and future presentations. I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. A recording will be made available to you so that you can review the things that were covered here. But as mentioned, importantly, reach out to us at any time and we'll assist you with your application. We wish everyone the very, very best. We've had some amazing applications in the past, as we said, that have resulted in fabulous work, and we have the same confidence this year. So thank you in advance for applying. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you at the Q&A session should you have any outstanding questions or are interested in seeing the Smarty Grants application form. Thanks everyone on behalf of my colleagues at Carers Victoria and Carers Victoria. We'll see you next time.